I'm running 10 kilometres on May the 22nd, 2022, in order to raise money for medical aid for Ukraine. 10 kilometres is quite a lot for me, so if you are listening to this when it gets released, please go to my GoFundMe page, Toby's Wheezing and Groaning for 10k for Ukraine. I'll put a link in the show notes because that's a bit of a mouthful, and any small amount would be really, really appreciated. It's Happy Times and Places, a Doctor Who podcast where moaning is verboten. We are simply accentuating the positive of a chosen story, and I, Toby Hadoke, have to guess what my guests' favourite things about their chosen story are.
Hi Toby, this is Laurence Clark. I'm a stand-up comedian, writer, screenwriter and playwright, and the story that I picked for your podcast is Terminus. So why pick Terminus? Well, whenever you listen to people talk about the story who worked on it, they always mention the really frantic studio recording and the fact they ran out of time. And I think that's partly because of me, because on the first day of recording, Monday the 11th of October 1982, I, as an 8-year-old kid, went to watch Doctor Who being recorded, which, as you can appreciate at the time, was the most amazing thing that has ever happened to me. It came about because Peter Davison was recording a sitcom called Sink or Swim in Whitley Bay in the northeast, which is where I grew up. And my mum tried everything to get him to come to our house. She rang Jim Fix It, probably a lucky escape, although I did, as you know, end up with that some years later. But he eventually did come. He came, pulled up to our house in his Audi and spent a couple of hours talking to me and invited me to come and watch a recording. And went away and we thought, oh, that's never going to happen. And then the production office wrote to us and invited me to watch the first day of recording on Terminus. And when it was recording, I was up in the viewing gallery in the little room next door to where the producer and the vision mixer and the director sat. And in between takes, Peter Davison would run up and see if I was okay and talk to me, which probably didn't help the production schedule. But I have vivid memories of watching those first few scenes. The scene where Mark Strickland holds the cube talking to the Black Guardian, and the cube was hot and kept burning his hands. I remember he kept dropping it. And there's a scene with Tegan and the Doctor, a very short scene where they're running up a corridor, and that was recorded over and over and over again. So that's why I picked Terminus. Years later, when I was on a BBC acting course, I was at one of those drinks receptions that they always have, and I got talking to Janet Fielding, and managed a whole conversation, not talking about Doctor Who until right at the end when I said thank you Tegan, and she then went ballistic and started shouting geek at me in front of the whole room, which probably didn't help my acting career. So let's crack on then with my favourite positive and possible things for Terminus.
Oh, well, what a lovely introduction from my friend Laurence Clark, a fine stand-up comic. So I would urge you to go and check out his work if you've not come across him before. And yes, he is one of us. So I'm very glad that he's taking part in this. And I don't know about you, but I'm very jealous of Laurence. He said visiting the set of Doctor Who was up to that point the most exciting part of his life. I think if I'd visited the set of Doctor Who as a kid, it would still be the most exciting thing of my life. And he's tempered that by choosing Terminus, which is a story not a lot of people eulogize. And the very raison d'etre of this podcast is to accentuate the positive, which I'm now going to try to do with part 1 of Terminus, which I'm not going to say is going to come particularly easy for me for reasons that I will explain, and I am not a Terminus knocker. But let's get into it. I'm on episode selection on the DVD, and so I'm going to press select, you press play or whatever it is you want to do, in 3, 2, 1. And we're going to enter part 1 of Terminus. Now, this is an episode I haven't seen an awful lot. Terminus was one of the very last videos I got, bootleg stories I got, because I missed all of this season, apart from Arc of Infinity, because I was away at school. I was sent away to boarding school, not because we had money. In fact, the opposite. My dad had gone when I was 4, and he was a medical man, and so a charity for bereaved doctors' families. We weren't actually bereaved, but they bent the rules. We were abandoned. Offered to send the youngest of Mum's kids away to a local boarding school, but nonetheless one that I had to stay at, apart from Saturday nights. And which meant the unthinkable happened. I missed Doctor Who, and nobody I knew had a video recorder, so I missed this season. My friend Ollie had to come in and explain to me. He largely told me the cliffhangers and the comings and goings of companions and who died, basically. But half term coincided with part 3 of Terminus, so that was the one that I sort of had a bit of experience of. So then when it came to collecting stuff and finding out about the stories, it was bottom of my list, because at least I'd have a flavour of it, whereas I'd not seen, Snake Dance or Mordrin or Enlightenment or King's Demons. And then when I did get this, why are you not talking about what's going on screen, Toby? Because it's Turlough being furtive in a corridor, which he is for ages in this story, and arguing with Tegan, which he does for ages in this story. I love Mark Strickson, by the way. That's definitely going to be a positive. And the idea of the companion trying to murder the Doctor, I think, is a great twist on what we tend to have of a companion figure, and I think is one of the good ideas of the show. Peter Davison sometimes, I know, has knocked it in interviews, said, oh well, it meant you had to keep him apart, but that's okay. The Doctor and companions split up quite a lot anyway. I don't think it's the fact that Turlough wants to murder the Doctor that means Turlough and Tegan are stuck in air ducts for the majority of this story. I think it's just that there's not quite enough story to go around, but we will see. But even when I got this on video, it was in the days where you had an E180 videotape, which annoyingly fits, apart from season 18 and the Mind Robber, because they have short episodes, it fits a traditional 7 episodes of Doctor Who, so you couldn't quite get 2 4-parters on. So thank goodness for the McCoy era when that came along, although season 24 was annoying because the 2 4-parters came first, so you had to have something out of order. However, for a reason lost in the mists of time now, I think I had Mordrin Undead and Terminus 2 to 4 on an E180. One had got lost in the melee, and I assume it's from whoever I'd got it from, because I was dependent on, drive-by Doctor Who drop-offs. There was a very furtive exchange thing going on. I wasn't part of fandom, so initially, I was by this point. I'd got friends in Wolverhampton who were fans. Anyway, so I don't know this episode very well. Fast forward to Doctor Who coming back, and the week before the broadcast of Rose, I was killing time. And I thought, well, there's a few Doctor Who's I'd seen Classic Who over and over and over again. And I thought, well, what are the stories? This is the last time I'm going to watch Classic Who for ages, because there's new stuff to have, which is great, and I'll eventually, be in the mood to watch. I felt like I'd sort of done it all pretty much. I knew it all like the back of my hand, so it was great because I knew that I could have a bit of time off watching the new series, and then hopefully my intrigue about the classic series would come back. But there were stories I knew less well, and this was one of them. So this was the story I chose to watch to kill time before Rose was broadcast. Was it the night before? It was certainly in the week of Rose. It wasn't on the day, because on the day I watched the Armageddon Factor, and I got halfway through part 2. And then my friend John came round, and we watched Enemy of the World 3 and the Space Pirates 2, because he'd not seen the orphaned episodes. And that was all that existed of Enemy of the World at the time. And again, I'm not massively referring to what's going on screen, because I've sort of have thought about this, because I consider this quite a tricky installment to cover, because it's quite a lengthy opening. I mean, I think these days you just have it with a couple of furtive looks to show the character relationships between, Tegan not trusting Turlo being up to no good. I mean, seeing as the TARDIS is infinite, it seems a bit mean to give him Adric's room. Also, we've spent more time with Turlo being furtive in the TARDIS and Tegan being a bit sulky about it than we did getting over Adric's death. I mean, it's interesting how the show often doesn't spend time on, the regulars doing their thing in the TARDIS, and rightly so. I think you want to be in the setting of the new adventure. And I think Andrew Cartmel was right when he, really when he came in later and minimised the TARDIS scenes, because my overriding image of a lot of these episodes is quite a lot of wandering around the TARDIS corridors and then landing on a spaceship and wandering around the corridors of that. But the Black Guardian being in Doctor Who was a really exciting idea for younger me, because I'd not seen the Guardians and I couldn't quite imagine them. And I thought I'd seen a clip at the end of Legopolis, but it was very unclear because it was in the negative, it was that bit from the Armageddon Factor. So I still couldn't quite make out. There was something rather sort of ephemeral and difficult to picture about the Guardians until I saw a picture in Doctor Who magazine when Valentine Dial died of the Guardian of the Black Guardian with the crow on his head. And I actually, as a young person, thought the idea of the Black Guardian having a black bird on his head and the White Guardian having a white one on his head were rather nifty ideas. Now I am not so sure, and yet being somebody of the target age, I liked the symbolism of that. I thought that was sort of apt, and it set them up as these kind of, he's not going to hang around a youth club or a bar or wander around W.H. Smith's with a dead rook on his head, dead crow on his head. But can he be an arch manipulator of the dark forces of the universe and look like that? Why not? That could be a manifestation of what they look like to us, because that's all that our ocular nerve can kind of manifest for such huge beings of hugeness. They're the Black Guardian, the White Guardian. They're about as big as it gets. And obviously the reality is it's they're represented by two ancient character actors sitting down and yelling. Well, in one case yelling and not in the other case being quite plaintive. But but I certainly like the idea of grappling with forces that huge. Valentine Dial has a marvelous voice, so I'll give it that. But I have to say, when I watched this episode, and that's the last time I watched this episode, gosh, was the lead into Rose. That week leading into Rose, so that's 15 years ago. I texted my friend Johnny Camden and said, I'm watching part 1 of Terminus. I think it's the worst episode of Doctor Who I've ever seen. Because I don't know, it seemed to me to encapsulate, and I really like the Davison era. I really like Peter Davison. I really like Mark Strickson. At the time, I was absolutely in love with Nyssa. That's not to say I'm not now, but I was really in love with her then. She was definitely my favourite companion, and I think Janet Fielding is brilliant as Tegan. But often the material they get wandering around the TARDIS is pretty thin, and in this case takes quite a long time. I like that design of the skull. I think that's a great image, and that's very intriguing. And I don't really know what's going on. But this you know, the episode seems to be picking up and adding some strange sort of jeopardy, and I have to sort of leap back in time a little bit and go, I've always defended this story against its sort of bad reputation, because I really like Stephen Gallagher, who I think's he's a proper sci-fi writer, and I think very happily and skillfully put proper sci-fi ideas into Doctor Who, which often is not hugely sci-fi. It's got, it's an adventure story where sometimes the British and the Nazis, or the cowboys and the Indians, or the baleful forces and the heroes, just happen to have silver hats and green skin, and actually, some of the more sci-fi Doctor Who turns me off a little bit, because I'm not particularly scientific. It wasn't a subject I was great at school, and I'll sometimes sort of nod along when Doctor Who wrestles with scientific concepts. When Christopher Bidmead comes in and goes, "I'm being very, very clever," and I'm like, "Yeah, can somebody invade Earth though, rather than talk about maths?" And that's certainly how I felt as a kid. I wanted autons making plastic things kill people, not wandering around inside the TARDIS in a loop. And I love season 18 now, but I as I say, as a kid, the Doctor Who I wanted involved a bit less wandering around corridors. This Black Guardian trilogy is quite interesting, because it's sort of set on 3 different spaceships, Mordrin, Terminus, and Enlightenment, with people walking up and down various corridors, sometimes arguing. And the corridors, to be fair, are different. They're quite Art Deco, aren't they, in Mordrin Undead? These corridors are sort of grey and sad. And the ones in Enlightenment are opulent and strange, and a sort of accurate rendition, but with added strange atmosphere of Earth history. But there's still a lot of there is still a lot of action that pretty much is people not running through corridors, but walking up and down them. I do like Mark Strickson is so good at being shifty, and that crystal effect is simple but nifty. You don't have a voice like that without smoking a pipe. I don't think he did smoke a pipe, Valentine Dial. He was the man in black on the radio and the Black Guardian. If you want to see him being good, he's very nice. Good as in decent, kindly. He's excellent as Dr. Keldermans in Secret Army, an underrated series that is on BritBox, which I don't have because I've got most of what's on BritBox on DVD. I don't quite... I'm trying to remember the details of this. I don't quite know why the door keeps disappearing and changing its design, but maybe that will become apparent. I have to say there are quite a few things in stories, and I watch these stories over and over. As I say, I could only watch episodes 2 to 4 of this over and over. And because I got it quite late when I got it, I watched it a lot. And I used to sort of think, oh, if only I had episode 1, I'd be able to fit some of the pieces I'm missing together. And then I finally watched episode 1 and went, actually, episode 1 doesn't really tell us anything that's useful to the subsequent 3 episodes. It's just the stuff I don't understand. I don't really understand. And I remember my friend coming. I was worried Nyssa was going to leave. I had a feeling. I didn't have the magazines or anything, so I had no insight. But I was counting down the days, especially when Turlo came. And go, well, if they get one new companion, they might get rid of an old one. And I had a feeling that Nyssa would go, and I was very sad about that because she was definitely my favourite when I was born in 74. So I'd have been God, younger than I thought. So when she joined, yeah, I'd have said I would have been 10 or 11, but I wasn't. I was much younger. The Doctor comes into this episode quite late, doesn't he? Presumably because he's spent the early part of the day talking to Laurence. I'm thrilled that Laurence got to visit the set of Doctor Who. Good for him. And I think that would make. I mean, this was a story that had a slight, I had a slight special bond with because I'd actually seen an episode of it from that season. That's tragic, isn't it? That was the one thing, and it was also because Doctor Who had been on a Saturday, which was the one day I went home, and pretty much when I started having to sleep over at a school, the BBC moved it to the middle of the week. It's almost like it's all about me, and not only about me but against me as well. That was my worldview, which sometimes still is, and it's one I've got to be careful of. Go, yeah. The universe centers around me and is there to spite me. That's quite a nice, slightly aerial shot from director Mary Ridge on her only Doctor Who. She did some Blake 7. She did the Blake 7 Terminal, didn't she? So she did Terminal, Terminus. That's a thing you don't get in, or that I think about as a sort of Doctor Who thing that actually isn't a Doctor Who thing as much as is a sort of not great android that sort of hangs around just to be there for a bit. Although, the android, the robotic colony in space has a plot purpose, as does the one in Sontaran Experiment. But they're a small and not very illustrious bunch. The sort of the silent service robots that provide a bit of jeopardy, but because probably would have taken quite a lot of effort to make. I like the pirates. You don't see them again, really. Space helmets. I think they're rather fun. I never think white quite works. These costumes are nice, actually, and I love the hair. I love Lisa Goddard's hair in this. I think she looks really funky, and Lisa Goddard is really interesting casting because she was a well-known television face. Often, we saw her, she was sort of posh and funny. So seeing her being a bit sort of tough and space piratey, which she does well, is another of those examples of John Nathan Turner, doing a bit of star casting, but I'm going to give them something that they'll have fun doing, something slightly different. Nobody really talks about Lisa Goddard in this. Married to Colin Baker at one point, but I think she's rather good, and I like Dominic Guard's ponytail. Dominic Guard has had he's a child psychologist now, isn't he? But he had a good career as an actor. He's got very boyish looks, so he played often sort of shifty youths. His brother, of course, Christopher Guard, is Bellboy in Greatest Show in the Galaxy. They are quite a showbiz bunch because Philip Guard, their dad, is the person who sampled at the end of I Am the Walrus, the Beatles song, or something. They taped a bit of Shakespeare off the telly. Is he doing Edgar from King Lear? And it's Philip Guard, who was also Philip Guard was in Robin Hood with Patrick Troughton, and that surviving clip of Robin Hood that we have that's on the Power of the Daleks DVD has Philip Gard in it, and Philip Gard has seen it, I hope, because I sent it to Christopher. So reunited with his past. But Dominic Gard is married to Sharon Juice, who is Control in Ghostlight, and Christopher Gard was married to Leslie Dunlop, who is Norna in Frontios and Susan Q in the Happiness Patrol. They're not married anymore. He's now married to Duffy from Casualty. So it's if only she'd been in Doctor Who, we could have had a sort of extended family thing going on. But I have to admit to being slightly perplexed by Dominic Gard in this, because he's a good actor. He looks right. He's in The Go-Between, the Joseph Losey film. He plays the young Michael Redgrave and got plaudits for that. And he's in a film that I remember from my youth called Absolution with Richard Burton and Billy Connolly and an illustrious supporting cast, and Di Bradley from Kes. And he's really good in that. And I don't quite understand why, despite his best efforts, I seem to recall struggling with him, because I think the ending of episode 1 is brilliant on paper and would be my automatic choice for being the thing I like most about the episode. But I seem to recall, I mean, it was 15 years ago last time I watched it, going, now we know, don't we? Now we know what it's all. And you go, what are you doing? Why are you doing it like that? Come on, give it a bit. It's one of those weird bits of acting that's sort of over the OTT and flat at the same time, which is a skill, but I'm not sure it's one that anybody should have. And as I say, it's intriguing, isn't it, how good actors can sometimes, for some reason, the elemental forces work against them. And it's a shame, because I think he looks good. I was dissing white costumes before. I actually quite like these white costumes, but I usually take a step back from them. I'm not a great fan of the ones in Ark in Space or the ones that the scientists have in Genesis of the Daleks. I don't know why I don't respond. I think I prefer dark and rusty to clinical and white. Although this is quite a dark and rusty story, and nobody loves it. Now I like that. Now you see, that's a simple trick, isn't it? Bandaged, bloody hands, slightly gnarled, bit of mucky makeup on, and it's just the human hand, but wrapping itself around your companion is a startling, alarming image, and the silence. And it's just a few extras with a few rags on, but I think that's really effective. That's nice jeopardy. He's got a lovely shifty quality, Mark Strickson. I think he's brilliant as Turlough. Do like that skull. I don't know why that door does that. Am I being thick? I don't know. And I really like Stephen Gallagher. I love Warrior's Gate. So as I say, I've always sort of, because people used to slag off Terminus something rotten, I go, no, it's doing something interesting. I do sort of admire Doctor Who when it goes, we're going to do something that isn't an invasion, we're going to do something that plays with a few ideas, and it's created its own setup with the veneer and what it is that they're up to, and it's a story about a company being too lazy to cure ill people, which is I think a really interesting setup for a Doctor Who story that then somehow ends up being about the Big Bang as well. Now, I think Martin Muncaster here is credited as Tannoy Voice, and I know that Tannoy complained because they are the company. A Tannoy is a bit like Hoover. A Hoover is a vacuum cleaner. Hoover is the make. A speaker is a speaker. A Tannoy is a kind of speaker or communication. If I was Tannoy, I'd have just gone, thanks very much, you're advertising our product, and suggesting that Tannoy still exists far into the future. I suppose they could be saying, yeah, but you're also saying we would allow ourselves to be used on a plague ship, where people aren't looked after properly. I think you're looking too far into it, Tannoy. I don't think they look that far into it. I think, oh yeah, odd to complain rather than go, yeah, cheers. But you can tell that that's just some git in an office, can't you, who's in charge of being petty. You know, petty department. Did you see Doctor Who last night? Yes, no, I didn't. What is it? Oh well, they mentioned us. Oh, did they? Sounds like a job for me. I shall write a letter of complaint forthwith. You meet those sorts of people. I've quite often, as a freelancer, when you meet people who work for companies whose sole job is just to be a bit obstructive and a bit of an arse, and you go, this is why I'm a freelancer, so I never have to meet people like you. You still do, of course, and then you have to remind yourself that they get a regular wage and a pension and will probably have a happy retirement, while you'll still be scrabbling for attention, love, and indeed money. So it's a momentary victory until reality creeps in. Look at this film. Suddenly it gets gorgeous, and the entire film allocation is spent in the ventilation shafts. What's he doing? See, how is he doing this? Oh, is it? Yeah. How do I feel about that? I think that the last bit is better than that, and I was talking through it because I'd invented a man from the petty department of Office Phil. But I think it's the now we know, don't we? Now we know what it's all about. That just seems to me to be slightly underpowered and yet too much. It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma, presented in a not very good performance. But I like the names as well. Olvir is a good name. And he does have to say we're all going to die for quite a long time, doesn't he? Anyway, well, I mean, I sort of girded myself to fill that out a little bit. Apologies, everybody, with a little bit of my backstory, and a few things that were, you know, unique to me about how I encountered Terminus. But I did feel I wasn't going to have an awful lot to say about certainly the first sort of 10 minutes in the TARDIS, apart from, you know, the rather curious thing of going, we're in the biggest spaceship in the world. You know, that friend of ours that we're still sad about, let's chuck all of his stuff in the bin to fit in this, to house this shifty character who's going to have absolutely no qualms about just going, yeah, I'm going to get rid of this. And then the fact that Tegan is just a bit sulky about it. No, you know, it all sort of pays lip service to drama that I think you would do so differently these days. You'd have faith in your characters to go, well, Turlough will at least be slightly more aware that, you know, something has happened here and that it's an emotional wrench, and Tegan will be slightly more than tutty about the fact that he's basically gonna burn any memories they have of poor old Adric. But I'm here to accentuate the positive. I do like the look of the pirates. I love Lisa Goddard's hair. I think that's a nice piece of casting. I do like Mark Strickson as Turlough. I do like the whole setup of the story, is that it is daring to be something a little bit different, and you know, it's a shame that the previous story or the next story involved lots of wandering around different kinds of spaceship, because they seem to be sort of stuck in that sort of rut for this period, which is a shame, because I think if you bunged it in the middle of another Doctor's era, I think you'd go, okay, this is a bit strange and nicely sort of dark. Does it manage to go beyond depressing to dark? You know, does it go beyond being a gloomy, drizzly day into being thunderstorms? Let's see, because we're getting some new characters in the next episode. But there's still stuff there. I'm intrigued by the setup. I like the fact that they had to take evasive action, and the TARDIS, you know, the door with the skull, which I really like, appeared, and Nyssa had to go through it. I think that's on paper terrifying. It wasn't quite pulled off as terrifyingly as I suspect it was imagined. you go, oh, we're on a leper shipper. That's interesting. And you know, how's it going to treat disease? I was taught in RE about leper colonies. I remember. Well, let's talk about that in future episodes, because I'm sure I'm going to have things to say about that. But what I think, is it going to be the skull on the door? I do like that skull on the door materializing thing, and this having to go through the door. And I did like the very simple menace of the hands wrapping themselves around Tegan. Doctor Who doing a really simple thing. Bunch of extras, hands, peril, scary. That's an image. That's an image if you're a kid you take away with you. I'm going to go with the skull door, I think. I'm going to go... I'm intrigued by that. It's a nice design. And it brings us into the story. And it's something a bit different. And it's ominous. It's ominous. Or do I like the hands? Skull and door. Skull and door. I don't think he's going to choose either of those things. What has Laurence chosen about episode 1?
So, part 1, I think my favourite thing is Lisa Goddard's space helmet, because it looks like it's been moulded around a hairdo. She's got this hairdo that comes out at the side, and if you look at the space helmet, it's like it's been vacuum formed around a hairdo, which is just amazing. I also love the fact that Tegan thinks a crowbar is called a pry bar. Some Australian thing could be, I don't know. And also the thing that Lisa spends all of her spare time synthesizing an enzyme for fun. Yeah, the hours must fly by in the TARDIS.
Yes, they do. I do. It is quite quaint, isn't it? The things that they have the companions doing in the TARDIS. On another day, I would have chosen Lisa Goddard's space helmet, but I thought that would have been damning it with faint praise. But I do seem to recall Nielsen's gun in Warriors of the Deep was one of the things that we chose, wasn't it? Okay, I'll accept that. And also, I'm quite excited because Laurence chose sort of 3 quite disparate things and didn't really tie them together. And I reckon if he does that with every episode, that increases my chances of me and him having the same thing. So maybe Terminus could be a winner for me. I don't know. Well, look, that was the difficult first episode because the plot kicks in a bit here. From here on in, we meet some of the characters, and I've seen these episodes a bit more. So I definitely did pad that out a bit with some sort of domestic stuff with just me, the regular cast member of this podcast, taking quite a long time to fill you in with a little bit of backstory, which is sort of appropriate, actually, considering what happened in the episode. So I'm reflecting what went on screen. But I think, now the story kicks in. Now we know, don't we? Now we know what it's all about. So hopefully there will be more fun to be had in the subsequent episodes of Terminus. Thank you for joining me and my good friend Laurence Clark. An excellent comic. Do check him out, if only to interrogate him about the day that he visited the set of Terminus. The lucky fella. Okay. Well, from a happy time and place of Laurence's childhood into hopefully a happy time and place for you listening to this, which is now about to come to an end. It's about to terminate. And I've done about 4 different exit lines there and then kept on talking. This is why I hate me. More even than I struggle with episode 1 of Terminus, which is now ending. Stop talking. Thank you for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My special guest is comedian Laurence Clark, who can be found on Twitter at Laurence_Clark. That needs clarifying though. It's Laurence as in Lawrence Scarman, not Dr. Lawrence, and Clark as in Clark from the Sea Devils, not incidental music composer Malcolm Clark. So Laurence with a U, Clark without an E. I'm sure that's clear. I'm very grateful to patrons who support this podcast, who include Stephen White, Andrew Wilson, Andrew Willis, Michael Williams, Rich Wiggins, Adam Westwood, Gary Wales, Apollo C. Vermouth, Reynard Toombs, Sabrina Tirabassi, Nick Temple, Nick Tedston, Neil Tate, Keith Say, Matt Sawyer, Jim Sangster, John Rivers, Dylan Rees, Jonathan Potter, Keith Pirrie, and Melvin Pena. The music is by Dave Gates, and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. So listen, if you think a man yabbering on about Doctor Who is worth paying for, it's a brave new world. Apparently it's a thing. You can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. You get early releases, exclusive material, and all sorts of other stuff there, including a unique podcast strand, far too much information which delves really deep and is for patrons only. There have been also interviews with actors and bits of writing and all sorts of other stuff that is just for patrons, because I am a sole trading independent artiste, uneligible for furlough. So, I fling this stuff out there, but it is what I do for a living, or attempt to. So if you would like to contribute to that, please do. I know that times are tough, so there's also the Ko-fi option, kofi.com/Toby Hadoke. Should you have a passing penny you'd like to chuck but don't want to do the monthly thing, which is totally understandable. Or you can do the thing that is free, because most of all, I'm just overjoyed that anybody listens to this stuff. But if you could leave a review or a rating, 5 stars, those are the stars that count, at iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and a couple of lines of review, that just tickles my algorithms, and the more appealing my algorithms are, the more algorithm digesters will come and sample a taste of my algorithms, which are, I don't like the way I'm saying that. You get what I'm saying, I think, I hope. You've probably lost the will to, certainly lost your appetite. Anyway, any of those things would be lovely. Thank you ever so much. Go on then, follow me on Twitter at Toby Hadoke, or these podcasts on at Hadoke Podcasts. And come to my comedy night in Manchester, Excess Malarkey Comedy Night, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. at the Breadshed in Manchester. Or you can do the monthly version online at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. Insert amusing post-credit sequence bon mot here.